is episode 296 of Mitolife Radio. I am Matt Blackburn, and today I'm excited to have back on the show Zack Abbott of ZBiotics. Zack was on the show about 2 years ago talking about the pre-alcohol probiotic drink that his company made. And it's basically a product that helps to prevent hangovers using a genetically modified bacteria that breaks down acetaldehyde in the gut. I've shared that product with friends, and they're always surprised how well it works. They came out with a new product called Sugar to Fiber, which is the focus of this show. It's the same strain, Bacillus subtilis, but it was given a different function to actually convert sucrose into levan fiber. So I asked Zack his thoughts on fiber. He breaks down the two different types, soluble and insoluble, why he believes fiber is important, where we get sucrose in the diet besides just table sugar, how many grams of fiber he consumes every day. I asked him his thoughts on the stress reducing benefits of fiber consumption. I asked him about fiber supplements. He talks about the benefits of short chain fatty acids, which is one of the main goals with getting this levan fiber produced in our gut. And he talks about how much sugar this product can convert into fiber roughly every day, which I thought was really fascinating. So enjoy the conversation. Here is Zack Abbott. All right, we're here with Zack Abbott. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be back. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. Since we first chatted, I've been sharing your pre-alcohol shots, not only online but also in person with people, and they're always just astounded at how effective it is for making them feel better the next day after drinking alcoholic beverages. It's pretty cool.
Love hearing that. It's always great to like. I feel like I always really enjoy it, but it's always good to know that everybody else is having a good time with the product as well.
Yeah, it's an innovative company that you have, because I came from the raw vegan world. I'm not anymore, but back around 2010-ish, I had a shirt, say no to GMOs, and I was really against genetic engineering. And you've educated me quite a bit on the benefits of it and how it could actually be used for good. And maybe you can kick it off here. These are transient GMO bacteria, right? They don't colonize your gut, and they're not permanent. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So the bacteria we use is called Bacillus subtilis. It's a common bacteria. It's a soil microbe. It's all over the place. We ingest it every day on the surface of fresh fruits and vegetables, and it's probably all over your kitchen counter. And indeed, for essentially all of human history and all of really kind of mammalian history, we've co-evolved with these bacteria being present all the time. And so despite the fact that we eat them every day, if you sequence a healthy adult microbiome, you're unlikely to find Bacillus subtilis in like significant numbers. So even though you're eating it every day, I mean, that's pretty good evidence to say that it's part of its natural life cycle to pass through your gut, and it's really common as sort of a transient kind of part of your gut community, but not one that takes up residence. And we have literally billions of data points to support that.
Super cool. Well, I guess we could start with the standard too, how you got into it, which I think in the first show you went into, but it's been quite a while. So maybe you could recap how you got interested in studying genetic engineering and using it for improving human health.
Totally. Yeah. So I did my PhD at Michigan, and I was studying in microbiology, and I was studying bacteria and how they essentially regulate their genomes. Like, how do they decide, for lack of a better word for bacteria, how do they decide to kind of turn different genes on or off? Or like, how do they know when it's the right time to do so? And so this is just like really interesting questions from on a purely academic level of like what's going on with bacteria genetically. And in the process of studying those bacteria, a few insights came out. One was, first and foremost, that bacteria are incredible. I mean, they're these single-celled organisms that have, hundreds of sensors all over the surface of the cell, and they can sense their environment and when they're stressed or when there's changes in pH or nutrients or whatever, and can very quickly react and respond and turn on. So it's just this like these tiny little robots with 100 little sensors that are just incredible. Like the technology is way beyond anything we can do. So I just thought I just fell in love with bacteria as like these just fascinating things. And then in addition, learning about, not from my research, but just being amongst microbiologists and hearing other academic labs talk about their research, just starting to see all of the impact that bacteria have on us, both good and bad. And, a lot of press goes to kind of the bad things that bacteria do. We think of them as these pathogens, and that's true, but it's actually only a very small percentage. And so most of the bacteria we live kind of in harmony with, or they are like beneficial to us in some way, or at least maybe neutral. And so learning more about that and just like, wow, like it's really incredible. Like our entire functionality is really dependent on bacteria, the way our brains develop, the way our immune systems develop. All these things happen because of the bacteria that are in us and on us. And so that started to inspire a lot of interest in like, well, what are the things, rather than combating the bad ones, which is important, like what are some of the things that bacteria do that are good for us? And like, what are ways we could potentially leverage that to deal with kind of like new problems that are kind of arising for humanity? And then of course, like I think the third leg of the stool was in the course of our research, we're constantly sort of, as we study bacteria, we maybe make a gene deletion or we'll make some edit. And it's very like matter of course that we edit the bacteria in some way in our as we try and study them. Like we're like, oh, we found this gene, it seems important, let's knock it out and see then like how it behaves. It's like, oh, okay, like based on that change in behavior, now we have a better understanding of that gene or something. And so it was amazing to me that we have like all this ability to kind of like edit bacteria really simply, and to not go too far down the rabbit hole, but I'll just say at the highest level that like our ability to edit bacteria is purely the outcome of us just understanding better how bacteria edit themselves. Bacteria change their DNA all the time. Literally, bacteria will live for a very short period of time, and in that short period of time, it's probably going to intentionally edit its DNA several times, and so intentionally or unintentionally. And so we've just in the last 50 to 75 years begun to understand the 3 billion years of evolution that bacteria have kind of like perfected these processes. And so because we understand it better, we can guide it better. We can sort of direct those changes in some way that is informational or useful to us. And so I started to think like, wow, well, what if we were to take safe, edible bacteria and then edit them in some way to provide a reliable benefit for us? And that was kind of like the initial seed of the idea that becomes ZBiotics, was just like, okay, I'm doing this all the time in my research. And so like, what if we did something that was useful from on like a product or human health level? And that just seemed like a really executable and simple idea. And I was surprised looking around that people hadn't done this before. And so I thought like, hey, this is a really great idea that could really benefit people and could also just be a really cool step forward. So that's kind of the beginning of ZBiotics.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure it triggers a lot of people, because in the health community that I'm in, I see a lot of naturalist arguments where it's like, even to the point of no supplements, or not brushing your teeth or not using toothpaste, and right. It goes to a certain level. And this is kind of the antithesis to that, right. I think.
Yeah, I think that's funny. Like, I don't mean to say to make light of that perspective, but like, I mean, I should say it's interesting that I think that there is this mentality that like natural is good, and I think that that's I don't ascribe to that because nature is not for the benefit of humans, right? Nature is just for the benefit of itself. Everything is selfish, every organism on the planet. And so humans like believing that like natural is more beneficial or harmonious for our body is not true, right? Like that there are many, many poisonous plants out there that we shouldn't eat, right? And like there are, many things that are out there to exploit us, right? And so when you think about like brushing your teeth, is like there's bacteria that are living in your mouth that are not there for your benefit. They're there for their benefit, and they're trying to exploit the calcium in your teeth for their own benefit, or the food that you're putting into your mouth, they want to take some of that. And so, and they may box out other bacteria that are good or beneficial for us that live in symbiosis with us. So, I would say that like as we understand that better and better, we can optimize for our own benefit and our own health. Without being at the expense of kind of like the rest of nature, right? Like just creating a niche that is actually beneficial for us. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Good points. My argument against the naturalist thing is that we live in an unnatural environment. Like we're pumping up billions of sulfur and nitrogen compounds into the atmosphere every year, and that changes how the sun affects us. That changes the air quality. What our lungs have to deal with. I mean, our liver and stomach are dealing with new things. It's like
yeah, that's exactly right. That like this is not a natural world we live in, period. And and for better or worse, it's I would argue for the better, but I understand why people argue for the worse. But regardless, irrelevant. We can't go back in time, and today we're dealing with a lot of modern problems that modern technology has created for us, and so they also will and going backwards is not a possibility. The toothpaste is out of the tube. So we really have to create modern solutions to those modern problems. Like you mentioned, pollution. There's no way to not breathe that in. And so, like, what if we made a bacteria that helped you deal with that pollution that you're inevitably going to breathe in, right? Or something. So I think that modern science and modern technology is a great way for us to deal with some of the problems that we've created in the last 100 or even 1,000 or 10,000 years, with the advent of agriculture. It's funny, people think of like a farm as a natural thing. It's basically the most unnatural thing that humanity's ever done to this planet is mow down forests and plant rows of crops. It's the most unnatural thing we've ever done. And so everything we can do to limit the impact of agriculture, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw a picture of a seedless avocado last week.
Whoa. I can't even picture that.
I know. Yeah, I don't know. That was the whole mentality back then with, not eating hybridized food, only eating heirloom. I don't think that's really practical, though, in today's world.
I mean, it's also like, again, this is sort of this ridiculous. Well, I shouldn't be so. I don't mean to. Sorry. I'd say it's like one of these like I think nonsensical kind of like mentalities that like heirloom is better or safer. It's like, right, if you look at it, a tomato, right, like it used to be like a little tiny berry that we have like crossbred until we got this nice big quote like heirloom, but it's this like giant tomato that is totally unnatural in the tradition. I think in somebody who considers natural. I think that human impact is just as natural as like the impact of an ant making an anthill. Like we are following our own nature, and we're editing kind of the world around us just like everything else does, just like bees basically select for flowers, and so but yeah, the idea that like these things are more natural or better in some way is totally nonsensical. Like the fact that tomatoes exist as a crop for us to eat is entirely humans, totally changing the face of the planet, which is normal. I think we try and separate ourselves from nature, right? Like humans are not natural in some way. Like we are an animal that follows our genetics and our instincts just like everything else on the planet. And we have our impact just like everything else on the planet. And someday that impact may result in it not being hospitable for us anymore. But that is really, that's normal. That's nature. Things go extinct all the time because of their own actions. And so
that's when the AI takes over and runs the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we are a bacteria that is reaching the edge of the petri dish and no longer has nutrients, right? And then we die and something else like feeds on our corpses, right? It's totally normal. Like that's a normal course of nature.
So are we talking about CRISPR technology? Not to get too crazy with the details, but okay.
Yeah. So no, sorry. I was
I wanted to give that context because I think it's just to open people up to the discussion that might be like, I don't know,
Yeah. No. So sorry, I meant to affirm the question, not the statement. No, we do not use CRISPR.
Okay.
CRISPR, is interesting. It is a bacterial process, but basically CRISPR is a process that bacteria developed to combat viral infections of bacteria. It's basically like their version of an immune system. And so CRISPR allows the bacteria to get really precise about what DNA they want to cut. They only want to cut viral DNA. And so we can edit or direct or harness that so that we can cut kind of any very specific piece of DNA. It's a really great gene editing system because of that. But that's not what we use. We actually use an older system, older in an evolutionary sense. So we use a system called homologous recombination. And so it's basically bacteria. It's pretty cool. Bacteria, they float around in their pond, and there's all kinds of bits of DNA floating around in there as well all the time. Bacteria die and they lyse and they release their DNA or whatever. And so over time, the last 3 billion years of bacterial evolution, they develop systems to take up that DNA. And then what they'll do is they'll basically scan that DNA along their chromosome. And if there is homology, or so if that DNA looks relatively similar to some DNA on theirs, they'll literally just swap it in. And they'll say, okay, let's see if this does anything that's beneficial to me. And I might die, but I've got, a million brothers and sisters who will live on. And then on the off chance that it's good for me, then I'll have acquired an advantage. And so they basically did. So homologous recombination is the homology or the identity between those two strains. And then that signals an exchange or recombination event. And so knowing that bacteria already naturally do this, and they have all the machinery to do this, all we really have to do is mix our bacteria with a piece of DNA where so if, let's say we want to have, with our first product, we wanted the bacteria to be able to break down acetaldehyde. So there's a gene that encodes for a protein that can break down acetaldehyde. And so we just have to give the bacteria a piece of DNA that encodes for that gene, along with a string of homologous DNA to the bacterial chromosome. And so then the bacteria will then naturally just take up that DNA, and it'll scan along its chromosome. And then when it hits the area of homology, it will just swap it in on its own. So we're really just directing a normal bacterial process of gene editing, the same as you would crossbreed a plant or something. This is just sort of the normal process of DNA exchange that bacteria already do.
Fascinating. That's really cool. Well, I wanted to talk quite a bit about fiber because people ask me all the time, how do I heal the gut? And I've never done the carnivore thing, but that's super trending. Plant toxins and stay away, elimination diets, which I think there's a better way, personally. And I'm a huge fan of fiber, and I think it has tremendous benefit. My fascination with it is stress reduction. I've felt that a lot myself. But you discovered levan, or not discovered, but was drawn to levan fiber, right? And that's what this new sugar to fiber product is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I agree with you 100% that, I think that there's a lot out there, and we're learning a ton about the importance of the gut and the gut microbiome and its impact on all elements of human health in some way. I think it's, we have as many bacterial cells in our gut as we do human cells in our whole body, roughly speaking. And what's interesting is that, your human cells, they all these cells in your body, they all have the same set of DNA, right? And so they have the same genetic capabilities. It's all the same, right? But all those, and that's, you have about 20,000 protein encoding genes, and that's for all your cells. But what's interesting is that all these bacteria that are in your gut, they all have different sets of genes, and they all have different capabilities. So, right, even though you have about the same number of cells, you actually have 150 times more bacterial genes than you do human genes. So genetically speaking, you're much more bacteria than you are human. And I think what's interesting here is that or I say what matters here is that those bacterial genes, they make proteins that perform all these functions. And so your ability to kind of function in the world is heavily dependent upon the set of bacterial genes that are in your gut. And those genes are constantly changing because your bacterial community is constantly changing. And so I agree. That's a long way around to say I agree with you that fiber is one of the most important things you can do to support that genetic diversity. So we want a lot of different kinds of genes, a lot of different functions. It's how we manage all the different stressors that basically enter our body. So fiber is what bacteria feed on.
Real quick, I just flew. I usually don't fly this, but two months in a row, which is a lot for me. You probably fly way more, and down to California. And I notice, every time my I think it happens to a lot of people. The bowel movements change,
definitely
frequency, and your stomach just feels different. And not only are you eating different food, but you're being exposed to all the stuff on the airplane, at the airport, traveling, and that affects our microbiome even on a temporary basis, right? But it has
absolutely
almost immediate effect.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's several things. It's a kind of a travel is like a perfect storm, especially if you're crossing time zones. So your your first of all, your microbiome responds to all the stresses that you respond to. So even just like waiting in line and security, all these things like create stress for you, and like that creates chemical signals that do affect your microbiome, and vice versa. Your microbiome sends chemical signals that affect you. It's really, you have many people have probably heard of sort of this like gut brain axis. And there's this sort of like superhighway of communication happening between your gut, which is the food acquisition, right? The thing that matters really a lot to your survival. And so it makes sense that there is this, direct kind of line of communication between your brain and your gut. And so when you're traveling, you're dealing with sort of a lot of the sort of different changes and stress, and you're also, like you say, you're shifting your diet. You're likely off your normal routines and habits and behaviors. You're eating different food. You're breathing different air. You're kind of having different antigens or things, immunostimulatory molecules entering your body. All of these things can massively shift your microbiome, and you see this all the time. If you basically like were to track your microbial composition before, during, and after a trip, you're very likely to see things shift and change. And for some people, that may result in no changes. Oh yeah, right. And I forgot to mention that you also, if you're crossing time zones, especially, that's probably going to affect your circadian rhythm and your sleep, which will also affect your microbiome in big ways. And so, some people maybe don't notice any differences when they see that shift in their microbiome, but some people that can have like a really profound impact that can last for sometimes days or weeks after they're back. So yeah, the idea that you want to support or stabilize, or at least help support the diversity. The worst thing that happens is that you have in a situation like this, the area of a time of stress, that like okay, kind of like when we think, geopolitically, right? Like if you have like an instability, like, one group can kind of like rise to power, kind of take over everything. It's the same in your gut, that sometimes in areas of instability, you can kind of have like one group bloom out and kind of take advantage of the situation. And that reduces your overall diversity. And so you want to support, you want to give everybody a fair chance to kind of like, the more diverse, the better in the gut microbiome. And so feeding your microbiome and basically the food that bacteria eat is fiber. And we say the word fiber, and I think that that can maybe connotate that it's a single thing. And it's like, oh, I need more fiber, and so I'll just have like an extra scoop of Metamucil or whatever. And while that won't hurt, it's just that's just kind of like one type of fiber. And the goal here is to have a diversity of all different kinds of fibers to feed a diverse set of microbes. And so that's really kind of, with our product Sugar to Fiber, the goal was to kind of increase the diversity of the fibers that you're getting every day, as well as getting an absolute value of more fiber as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, because they're soluble and insoluble, right? And they have slightly different effects.
Yes, exactly. So you have soluble fiber, and then you have insoluble fiber. And so that means really its ability to dissolve in water. But then I think what's really important in terms of the microbiome is fermentable and non-fermentable. And they roughly overlap. For the most part, soluble fibers are typically fermentable and insolubles are typically not. There's exceptions to the rule in both cases. But yeah, you have these fermentable fibers. Fermentation is bacterial kind of digestion. And so and even within those categories, there are dozens or hundreds or countless amounts of different kinds of fibers even within that, right? So fermentable fiber is the food, that's the prebiotic fiber, that's the food that food for the microbes in your gut. And a fiber is a string of sugars put together, right? And so you could string a sugar together in like a single chain. You could string it in like to a branch chain or a big bush. And each one of those like chemical connections requires a different enzyme, and a different bacteria is going to be good or bad at dealing with that structure. And then you can imagine you can mix two sugars together to make like that chain, or you can mix six sugars together, or you could take a different sugar and string it together. So there's all different kinds of fibers, and all of those fibers feed different bacteria. And so the goal is, right, to eat as many, and so fiber generally comes from plants and fungi. And so eating as many different kind of like non-animal products as possible to get as many different of those different kind of fiber structures to feed as many different bacteria as you can is really the goal to support a healthy microbiome. So when you're traveling, like I try and, get a salad with like 10 different plants in it to get like, lots of different kinds of fiber to support my microbiome as I'm putting it through all these stresses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always search for a salad and a burger at an airport. That's my ideal meal.
That's your perfect combo. Yeah, nice.
So is the leaven fiber? I would imagine that's soluble then.
Yeah. So levan is the
Leaven.
bacteria. Well, to be full transparency with you, Matt, I don't actually know how it's pronounced. I know that's weird to say, but like I've only look, I'm a microbiologist. I study this stuff all the time, but I mean, I just see it written in a scientific paper just like anybody else, and so I've said levan. I've heard other scientists say levan or 11. And so I'm actually not 100% sure what is the correct pronunciation, but yeah.
We'll
So
go with leavan.
okay, cool. So yeah, levan fiber. The reason why we chose that one specifically, yes, it's a soluble fermentable fiber. There's good data to show that it supports like the growth of bacteria that we know can make short chain fatty acids. And so that's kind of at the simplest level, that's what we're going for. Short chain fatty acids are anti-inflammatory molecules that many bacteria in your gut make in response to kind of their own fermentation, and that's the goal. That's what we're shooting for, and so we know that levan supports that. It's also what I like about it is that it's not part of your normal diet. So you get that salad with 10 different vegetables in it, you're almost assuredly going to get like almost no levan. It's really rare. And so by giving you this fiber, we're very likely not doubling up on something you've already eaten somewhere else. So we're kind of increasing the diversity of the soluble fiber, fermentable fiber that you're getting in your diet. And that was one of the reasons why we chose that as the specific fiber to make.
The most fascinating part to me is that it actually takes sucrose and converts it into the fiber. I personally don't think like even white sugar occasionally is going to kill you.
Right.
It's all a balance of life, and I think enjoying life is a huge part of health. It's really
Absolutely.
underrated. I personally, every once in a while, Mexican Coca-Cola, always in glass. I don't
Mm-hmm.
do high fructose corn syrup or Red 40 and all other stuff.
Right.
But a little phosphoric acid, some natural flavors. Who knows what's?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And sucrose. But I know on your website, I was reading about your product, and you were talking about on there all the different sources of sucrose. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought sucrose was mostly found in like sodas. But I think on there you were saying fruits and vegetables also have a small amount. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it depends, right? So sucrose, exactly, that's table sugar. And the most abundant sources of sucrose are cane sugar, right? And beets have some sucrose, and so but like the fact is that it's a naturally occurring sugar. Sucrose is just a glucose and a fructose stuck together, and so both of those are obviously very abundant sugars, and so
I see.
sucrose is a really common sugar. So it just depends on the food, right? Actually, interestingly, there is more sucrose in a carrot than there is in a banana.
Wow.
Well, there's about the same amount, but it's a per gram. So there's sucrose and all. And so when people, sometimes it's interesting when I say, oh yeah, our product sugar to fiber converts sugar from your diet into prebiotic fiber in the gut. And people are like, oh well, I don't eat sugar. And I'm like, you do. Like you would die first of all if you didn't eat any sugar, and it's a really common molecule. And I think people think of that and they think of like added sugar, or like you say, which oftentimes is high fructose corn syrup.
Mm-hmm.
So sucrose is a really common sugar molecule, and as you said, it's not a bad guy here. It's just something that exists in the diet, and quite frankly, in most diets, we're not at a loss of that. It's a good substrate because we have enough, or often cases more than enough of it. And so what that really becomes is just a great place for us to draw from, like a good sink for us to draw from in order to build this beneficial fiber. And I agree with you 100% on the idea that like it also isn't necessary for our health to eliminate all sugar. First, your brain runs on glucose, so sugar is actually really important. And then in addition, even like you said, like the occasional like soda or whatever is, if it makes you happy, if it brings you joy, I think as long as it's done responsibly and in moderation, then it is something that is going to be beneficial for your health and well-being in the long run. And so our product is meant as a way for you to get an additional fiber from a molecule we know you probably are going to have in abundance, that it's not going to hurt to reduce a little bit. And ultimately, we're talking about it's also amounts here where our product converts about 5 to 10 grams of sugar into 5 to 10 grams of fiber every day. So 5 to 10 grams of sugar is a pretty small amount of sugar. Your Mexican Coke probably has 40 to 50 grams of
40.
sugar. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, 40 grams of sugar. So it's a pretty small amount of sugar we're taking away, but 5 to 10 grams of fiber is actually a meaningful amount of fiber. So, the average person should be getting somewhere in the ballpark of about 30 grams of fiber a day. And so we give you 5 to 10 grams. That's up to a third of your daily intake. And so we see that the vast majority, I was blown away by this, that 95% of Americans don't get enough fiber in their diet. That's essentially everybody. And that was really surprising me. It was that high. And on average, we get about half of the fiber we're supposed to get. So on average, people get about 15 grams of fiber a day. So the idea of us giving you another 5 to 10 grams, that's a meaningful add-on to kind of what you're already getting. And but as I say, it's not just about absolute values. It's about diversity of fiber intake as well. And so this levan fiber is something that of the other fibers you're getting, we're adding on an extra one, a different one that is going to be helpful and beneficial and kind of supporting the diversity of a microbiome. So altogether, that's kind of why I think the product is valuable, even though, it's converting sugar, but it's not really the goal. Is like less about sugar reduction and more about kind of this fiber creation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I interviewed Karen Hurd, like, I don't know, a year ago on soluble fiber, and she's a big fan of, like, she started like the bean diet, big fan of legumes.
Yeah.
And she talked about quite a bit how it reduces adrenaline. And to me, like, this cortisol and adrenaline reduction is huge, especially for my lifestyle that usually elevated. So doing everything I can to I still drink coffee because I think that has a net benefit.
Right.
But yeah, I've noticed if I don't eat enough fiber, I do feel psychologically more stressed. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. I'm exactly on the same page as you, Matt. Same way, cortisol is my enemy. The system is amazing for humanity, for the vast majority of our history. But now that I'm not what it was made for, right? I sit at a desk all day and look at a computer screen. I don't need to run away from any tigers or anything. But my body seems to think I do with all these emails piling up and everything. And so I have all this cortisol. And what's great is that the bacteria in your gut are actually good at helping you manage that. Though you have to support them in that ability. And so you're exactly right that, like, short of, getting a job that allows me to get a lot more exercise and things like that, I have to do other things. And one of the great things I can do is kind of support my microbiome. And so, and I'm also a big fan of beans because of the great source of vegan protein that also is full of fiber, which is great. So I'm one of those, and so I'll say this, like, I'm one of those 5%. I track all of my diet, my macros and spreadsheets, and I'm always just really interested in that kind of stuff as a scientist. And I get between, 50 and 60 grams of fiber a day with before sugar to fiber. So I get enough fiber in my diet, but again, like I say, it's not even just absolute values. For me, I still love taking sugar to fiber every day because I like the diversity. I don't get levan in my diet. So my goal is to get 50 plants a week and 50 different types of fiber. And so levan for me is really valuable because I can't get that anywhere else. And so I like the diversity element of it, but it's also helpful as just like an absolute value thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm building my third geodesic growing dome, the Growing Spaces company from Colorado, on my new acreage right now. And I think they're just starting the raised beds. So I'll be growing a lot of diverse plants. I'll hopefully have a lot of different fibers in there.
That's super cool. Yeah. I love that.
You answered one of my questions too. I was going to ask about how much so you said it converts roughly 5 to 10 grams of sucrose to 5 to 10 grams of fiber. But I guess I'll just ask one of the listener questions early. Yeah. Can you up the dose of sugar to fiber and double that amount, or is there a maximum that occurs?
So, yeah, I mean, it's, at some point it gets to enzyme kinetics, right? Like the more enzyme that, is drawing from the same pool of substrate, you're going to get diminishing returns. And I think you can probably predict my answer as well, that that's not necessarily more beneficial either, that getting more of the same type of fiber is going to also have a sort of a diminishing benefit for you. Like having some levan is good. That supports like a cluster of microbes that maybe not otherwise would be fed, but you give too much of that and then you're just feeding the same microbes. And the goal is to kind of get a diversity. So theoretically you could eat more and get some more. You probably wouldn't get double. But I don't think that you're getting an additional benefit either. Unfortunately, like with our first product, there's no get out of jail free card here. Like, it still requires you to like eat a diverse diet of different plants. But the goal here is that this is a toolbox to help you kind of like do better essentially than you could otherwise.
Have you ever personally experimented with like fiber supplemental blends, like in the tubs? I know I was trying one from Thorne last year. There's different ones. Have you messed around with any of those and seen benefit?
A little bit. I tried one or two that in the early, like a long time ago. And at that time, I had, it gave me an upset stomach, which, that's normal. Like, right. Even with our product or anything, like, the goal here is to shift your microbiome. And so that change in the microbiome can absolutely, you temporarily might feel that. But what was interesting about that experience for me was more that inspired me to kind of look into, okay, well, what is this fiber? What was happening? And then reading more about it, and talking to, at that time I was still in grad school, and I talked to, one of the PIs in our department or scientists in our department who is an expert on like fiber and fiber utilization in the microbiome. And he sort of kind of gave me the rundown on some of those things. And I guess my big takeaway was really at the end of the day that like, one of the problems with fiber supplements generally is that like, and to be clear, I want to like give the takeaway at the beginning here that like, I'm not advocating against fiber supplements, but so, everything's got a trade-off, right? And so the trade-off with that is that you're sort of giving yourself like a bolus of that fiber all at once, and it's usually a processed or manufactured fiber. And so with fiber, the longer the chain, the better the benefit in most cases. And so when you're getting these fibers in a tub, they're usually shorter chains of sugars kind of made into this fiber. And then as they pass through your stomach acid, they actually get broken down a little bit further. So you're not getting like a big, nice, long fiber chain like you would from like a plant where it's sort of like protected more in kind of the cellulose and cell structure of the plant. And so ideally, you're getting your fibers largely from food. So as I say though, like my takeaway is that that's not to say that fiber supplements are bad. It's just that they're not necessarily ideal. But I do think that if you're taking a fiber supplement, specifically prebiotic soluble fermentable fiber, like for the case of like feeding your microbiome, a solution like one you mentioned where it's a mixture of several is that is a better hypothesis than a single one. And so one of the things that's cool about sugar to fiber, our product, is that we're not actually giving you fiber. We're giving you a bacteria that makes fiber in your gut, so past the stomach acid. And so therefore, like we're able to actually build pretty long, and we've demonstrated this with like NMR and stuff, the quality of the fiber. We're making pretty long chain fibers that mimic the food. And it's not as a single bolus, like all at once, right? You're not taking like you fiber supplement, you're getting like 10 grams all in one go. And it sort of like reaches the microbiome in one big chunk. And then like there's like this feeding frenzy of the bacteria. Instead, we're sort of giving you this slow drip of like fractions of a gram out of every meal you eat all day long. So that kind of naturally the same way you would from like if you're eating your food. And so those are some of the reasons why it's sort of, this is like a little bit of a different approach than like a direct fiber supplement. I think that both have their merits and both have their trade-offs. But at the end of the day, that's the differences. Yeah.
Okay. Did I read that natto is a pretty decent source of the levan? Okay.
Yeah, so true. If you eat natto, which it's a very small fraction of people in the United States do, that is because natto is soybeans that are fermented by Bacillus subtilis, which is the bacteria that we use, and so they make levan fiber in the process of fermenting the soybeans. So we're essentially kind of doing that same process, but like in your gut.
I sell systemic enzymes with nattokinase is one of the main and serrapeptase.
So nattokinase is like a really amazing and fascinating protein, and so that it's got a lot of really interesting science behind it. And so I'm like super interested in kind of some of the things that might be happening. We're sort of like thinking about because Bacillus subtilis makes nattokinase, so we're thinking about that as well. So that's a really cool. It's a very cool protein with a lot of cool science behind it.
That'd be incredible. Yeah. And what can you break down what is levan sucrase?
Yeah. So levan sucrase is the enzyme that makes levan from sucrase, from sucrose. Sorry, from sucrose. So basically, sucrose, as I said, is a glucose and a fructose stuck together. And so then the enzyme levan sucrase grabs that sucrose and splits it apart into fructose and glucose. And then it takes that it doesn't do anything else with the glucose. It releases the glucose and it takes that fructose and then it stacks all the fructoses together into a long chain of fructoses, which is levan. So levan is an oligofructose chain, basically.
Oh, cool. Okay. And how long does the bacteria, is it similar to your pre-alcohol shot? Is it about like one a day is what you guys
Yeah.
recommend?
So yeah, with sugar to fiber, the goal here is this is like a daily fiber support kind of product. So the idea that you take this every day at the same time, it doesn't matter when, but ideally kind of same, because basically Bacillus subtilis, as we talked about at the beginning, it doesn't stay in your gut. It just kind of passes through, and it passes through in about a day for most people. And so basically you take this at the same time every day, then you're kind of keeping in a constant amount of this bacteria around to kind of help perform this function. So, for instance, for most of us, I think our most consistent routines are often in the morning. And so most people, like myself included, I included my breakfast cereal, but whenever you have like a routine that you can easily stack this into. So, your post-workout shake, or if you have a nighttime routine or something, whatever's easiest.
And I think I was reading on the package, it was talking about what you can mix it with. Just not anything hot, right? Like over
Right.
180 degrees.
Yeah. So I mean, like my wife puts it in her coffee, just waits for it to cool down until it's drinkable. It can actually tolerate like a good amount of heat. It just right at brewing temperature as like 190, 200, that's too hot. But at the point where you can drink it, I think it's down to, I don't remember exactly, 130, 140, which is anything below 180, our bacteria is going to be okay. So as long as if you can drink it, the bacteria can stand it, basically.
That might be what I start doing, because with all the supplements I'm playing with zeolite and it's a lot of liquids. So
Yes.
I might start integrating it into my coffee routine.
Yeah, the goal is to put it in, to not have it be an extra step. That's why we did it as like a mixable powder, was that like just whatever you're already eating or drinking. Like, so I think the best, in terms of like user experience, the best is when you mix it into something like yogurt or cereal or something where you're not even really going to notice it. And that's good. But yeah, you can definitely put it in your morning coffee. Like I say, as long as you let it cool down a bit.
And even though it's soluble, well, I noticed it doesn't mix in water, right? There's chunks that stay there.
Exactly. So a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the bacteria themselves are not soluble, right? Like they don't dissolve in water. So the bacteria will never totally mix. So you have to continue to test for them. And then we also include so the package starts, the amount of bacteria, you can get bacteria really small. So we get a lot of bacteria in there with a very small amount of volume. And so we had to add some filler in order to make it like a pourable powder. And so being a microbiologist, I wanted to make sure like even our filler was valuable. So I did add, we added like three small amounts of 3 different soluble fermentable fibers in there as well. So it's not really a ton, right? It's a total of about like 2 grams of this soluble fermentable fiber filler. So 3 different half of a gramish of each of these fermentable fibers as well. And so, and while they are all soluble, they have different levels of solubility in different kind of beverages. So it's not a perfect, it's not perfect in terms of mixability. And so those are things we're working on too, right? Like we launched it about a month ago. We're really excited about it and we're really happy with it. But all that is to say that, we're definitely not at perfect yet. So we can make it better in terms of mixability.
Yeah, it's not bad for me. I mean, how I was doing it is just mixing in 8 ounces of my filtered water with a little frother, and then I would chug it down and then add some more water at the end just to get the last chunks.
Yeah,
yep.
That's exactly what I do. Well, I put it in my breakfast cereal, but when I'm traveling or something and my routine's messed up, I'll just pour it in the glass, like add like a few ounces of water, swirl it, drink it, and then there's still a little bit left, add a little bit more water, swirl it, and drink it again. Yeah, exactly.
Any reason why you added lavender? I know it's the last ingredient, but
yeah, there's a few of those. So let's see, we've got like cherry extract, pear pulp powder, licorice root extract, and lavender are all just flavorants. We try to make it have a very mild, but like some sort of flavor. So if you are mixing in water, there's some user experience to that would be pleasant. Again, that was our first crack at it, and we're getting feedback on what people think of the flavors and stuff. So all these things to say, work in progress. But generally speaking, it should be, it's really mild. it's really mild. I don't taste it when I put it in my cereal. I don't even notice it's there. But if you put it in water, you'll taste something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty mild though.
Yeah.
I was expecting more of a flavor, which it was perfect to me. I think it's
Right.
great. So
We didn't want to like our goal was to have something that you experienced, but not have it be in an ideal world. It isn't offensive or lingers for a long time or anything like that. So that was the goal. Yeah.
mhm. um, I'll ask some of the listener questions here.
Sure.
Kind of controversial. I know you can't give like medical advice,
All
but
right. Right.
someone asked ailments this powder would be good for, or potential problems it would be good for, and kind of the same thing, good or bad for SIBO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that, like you said, I mean, at the end of the day, I can't give like any medical advice, obviously, and we didn't test for any medical. We're not a drug, so we didn't test for any medical conditions or anything. So, I couldn't say specifically. But and to try to not make it a total dodge here, I'll say that like, you know, the goal here is, providing you with more fermentable fiber, which supports a diversity of microbes. And so I think that in most cases, that's likely to be something that is supportive of your health. And it's targeted for people who already are healthy and then want to kind of like balance or stabilize kind of and increase the diversity of their microbiome. But I would say anybody who has any medical condition, SIBO or otherwise, I consult your doctor. And the fact is that this is a live bacteria. And so for some people that might not be ideal, compromised, or if you have like bacterial overgrowth, it's like those interactions are variable. So it's just one of those things that you should definitely, your doctor knows your health situation. It's also very individualized and personalized, right? Even with something like, for instance, like IBS, there's a lot of different things that go into that, right? And so one person's IBS is not the same as somebody else's. And so for some people, more fiber is a good thing, and for some it's not. It can be irritating. And so it's really something that, to some extent is really individualized. That's the unfortunate, like that's where we are when it comes to our understanding of the microbiome. It's a very variable situation.
So if a friend came to you and said, Zach, how do my gut's messed up, I'm always gassy or bloaty, or I have loose stools or constipation.
Right.
What's your kind of usual elevator pitch that you tell them? Like, do you tell them to work with somebody or?
Yeah. So I think that at the end of the day, even if you're working with a medical professional, when it comes to your gut, it's gonna be a trial and error. We're just, barring very specific situations, but like just general in general, like you're describing, like bloated or gassy or loose or hard stools or whatever that might be. It's I think that there's a very strong hypothesis based on a lot of good data to say that like having a diverse microbiome fed with a lot of different fermentable prebiotic fibers is likely to be beneficial. And so I'd say like trial and error in that realm of like, first and foremost, eat a diversity of, my first advice to almost anybody is eat a diversity of fiber. So like get as many plants every day as you can. And that usually is something that can be helpful. But again, it depends on the person. Like, right, if you're sensitive to FODMAPs, for instance, then you want to be really careful about what fibers you're eating. And so that's not blanket advice for everybody. But generally speaking, that's kind of like my first go-to.
Do you think any of the stool tests are good? I remember in the biohacking world, I did the Viome.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been like 8 years ago now, or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I heard some things that wasn't accurate, and I forgot if I asked you this question with our show a few years ago. But any of the stool I know was their GI map, I think, is a really popular one.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like, at least at the level of just like interest and having more information, it's certainly valuable in that sense. I mean, in terms of accuracy, I think that they're all accurate enough for you to get a picture. What we do with that information, you go to the, even the most cutting edge academic community studying the microbiome. I think that, we're still kind of at the early stages of understanding what we can do with that information. And I think there's some stuff that is pretty clear. Like obviously if you see like a high outgrowth of something that's like pathogenic or something, that's a problem. But like, in general, it's, you have that information, and then like, what's the action you take with that is harder. And so I think that that's still kind of where we have a lot of work left to do. But, on a purely interest level, I think like for me, for instance, with some of these ones, like I'm always interested to see like, okay, what's my what's my diversity score? Like how diverse is my microbiome? I think that that is always great to see. And then something like Viome is cool. It's one that I'm familiar with. Not to say some of those don't have this as well. Is that like they kind of tell you beyond just who's there, it tells you what they're able to do. So sort of like functionality things like, do you have a lot of fiber degrading enzymes? Do you have a lot of short chain fatty acid production enzymes being expressed? And so I think that's cool too, to kind of like, again, I don't know what you do if you see bad scores on that yet, per se, but at least and it's more information, which I think is cool.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you too earlier the short chain fatty acids. Um, I know there's benefits to those, but what are some like broad benefits to having more SFAs?
Yeah. So fundamentally, short chain fatty acids, like they are molecules that can essentially help gut lining integrity and reduce inflammation. And so the downstream benefits of that are like myriad and different from person to person, but fundamentally like that it's like really like a nice foundational, it's like, it's your ice pack. It's like this very nice thing that like really helps the gut integrity and it can support mucus production and gut barrier integrity. And so that's really kind of like the core benefit. And then from there, a lot of things happen downstream when you have like systemic inflammation due to like kind of an inflamed gut, like around, like you said, like or actually I don't remember, you had said about anxiety or no, what was
Or
your
just like chronic stress
yeah,
increase, like
stress.
yes, cortisol and a
Right,
chronically
exactly.
high.
So
Yeah.
definitely a potential downstream effect, not for everybody, right? But like, inflammation, is definitely, energy and health benefits or health impacts across the board that kind of can happen from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd imagine there's a like a lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin connection too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, so you're essentially, your immune system is in like constant kind of communication with the microbiome and like you say, like LPS and things that are like pro-inflammatory, and then you have things that are anti-inflammatory, and you want to have the right balance of both,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't want to have too much of one or the other. And it's very important for like in a healthy relationship that your immune system is sort of spring loaded by the microbiome, but it's not, that spring isn't releasing too early, which happens a lot. But also you're not like too tamped down or you can get senescence and things like that. So it's important to kind of have a nice balance.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Last question someone asked, would your product help with ketosis?
So as we talked about before, it's like we're talking 5 to 10 grams of sugar
Yep.
a day. So it's really not going to, and it's really only has access to, so most of the sugar you eat is going to be absorbed pretty quickly through mouth, stomach, small intestine, and our bacteria is only going to become really like active and expressing that enzyme kind of later in the small intestine and then in the large intestine. And so it's really that like overflow, which happens kind of at a small amount. So unlikely to affect kind of like absorption of sugar in a meaningful way. So I would say that like in either direction, whether you don't want or do want ketosis, it's really like our bacteria is probably not going to have a meaningful impact on that.
Awesome. Well, how many products are you planning to come out with? Because I'll buy them all.
100. No, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of really exciting ideas. This is definitely still, the first product and the second product are very different, and that was by design. We really wanted to show that there's all kinds of amazing things we can do to benefit your health with bacteria that we've engineered to kind of like perform some useful and specific function. And so at the end of the day, this is a chassis for a function, and there are so many cool functions out there. So we just did a big ideation retreat, and we have a big list of new product ideas. And so I'm really excited to validate those and kind of dive in further. So this is definitely not the last of us. The lots more cool ideas in the pike for all kinds of stuff. It's exactly like we were talking about at the beginning. You know, humanity is facing a lot of challenges to our health in kind of a modern world, and a lot of things that we can't avoid, like with our with this product, like less nutritive food and more highly processed food, and but pollution in the air, pollution in the water, things that are just, they're really these are challenges for human health, and there's a lot of things we can do proactively to deal with that, but we can also build solutions to kind of help, and that's exactly what we're focused on.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys are cooking up. I think the air pollution one is mostly overlooked. as a huge problem. I'm really sensitive to it when I travel.
Hmm.
I mean, I live in the
Hmm.
forest, so it's kind of dramatic. When I go into the city, I definitely
Yeah,
feel it.
you can feel it. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess with your products, it's just a matter of probably seeing what the most common problems are that
Hmm.
more people are facing, and
Right,
then
exactly. What are the common things we're being exposed to
yeah.
that are an issue? And then how do we think, then we have to look at the biology. Like, where do we think we could actually make a physiologically relevant impact? Like there's a lot of stuff out there, and maybe it's just like not feasible for bacteria to deal with all of them. But like, okay, where do we think we have a handhold with the bacteria?
Amazing, super cool. Well, yeah, it's always a blast, Zach, to speak with you. So thanks for
Yeah,
coming on.
likewise, man. I love it. This is really fun. Thanks, Matt.
And it's ZBiotics.com, and I think my code Blackburn works. I don't. I'll
It
look into it. I'll yeah.
it should. It should. Yeah, we'll make sure it does. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll look forward to having you back when you come out with your next product, and stick around as we close out the show. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
After speaking with Zach, I'm definitely inspired to increase my fiber intake. Definitely helps having a greenhouse, especially a geodesic dome greenhouse from the company Growing Spaces. On my new mountain, the wonderful people at Monarch Greenhouse Solutions have been building my greenhouse really quickly, and it's almost complete. And I'm really excited to have unlimited leafy greens throughout the winter and keep my 4 citrus trees going and my 2 avocado trees. And going back on grid, even though I'll have a solar system set up before the end of the year, there won't be a lot of sunlight to charge my batteries, but I'll still have a lot of electricity to run pretty much whatever I want. And I decided to use grow lights in there to see what I could do throughout the winter and possibly just keep the fruit trees producing throughout the winter would be really worth it for me, because up here in the north, there's a lack of produce for much of the year. A lot of it has to be imported. So to produce things like avocados, lemons, limes, even grapefruit up here in North Idaho is really a game changer. And then in the summer, I could take advantage of the awesome apples and plums and peaches that can be produced up here. But this is a great supplemental source. I love that it's slow release, as Zach described. I brought up Mexican Coca-Cola during the interview, but more than Coke, I actually drink the New Brew euphoric seltzer drink that I have on my website, an affiliate for them. And it's basically a small amount of kava kratom extract with a little bit of caffeine, 30 milligrams of caffeine. But what I really love about it is they actually use real sugar, because I've experimented with allulose, and for some reason that fake sugar really messes up my gut. In this drink that I'm actually sipping on right now, they have stevia, monk fruit, but cane sugar as more abundant than those two. And I really love to see companies use actual real sugar instead of the artificial sugars or the sugar alternatives, because I really do think cane sugar is better, especially if you're doing a lot of mental work like me, or you're very physically active, or both, or if you're taking this ZBiotic product, because 3 grams of cane sugar is just a drop in the bucket. It's almost nothing. As I've said lately on Instagram, it's hard to decipher what's making me feel so grounded and stable and energized in the chaos of 2024. I know we're all going through it collectively, and a lot of us have personal stuff going on, but this ZBiotic has just been another awesome stack to get this levan fiber, like you said, 5 to 10 grams a day, to supplement my fiber intake and help to soak up excess hormones like adrenaline. I just love what Zach is doing over at ZBiotic. I think it's a really innovative company. Like I said, when I got into the health movement and raw veganism is very anti-GMO, and there's still this aversion to anything that isn't natural in the health community, as we talked about. But synthetics have their place, unnatural tools have their place, especially living in an artificial world. I like what Zack said, that there's no going back. That's the mic drop right there. So if you want to check out the product, it's ZBiotics.com. The discount code Blackburn should work. Highly recommend both of their products. They have the pre-alcohol shots, which I buy in bulk, and then the sugar to fiber, which I take that product every single day. And like you said, ideally around the same time. My website is matt-blackburn.com. I have my CLF protocol. You can read up there my featured recommended products on the front page. And then if you click shop on a desktop, it's a little easier to see. You can see all of my recommended products. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's hard to tell what's working when you're adding a bunch of things at once. But I can tell you what I've been consistent with lately are the Apollo Neuro, which I'd like to have a show with those people at some point. It's basically a thing that looks like a watch that you can wear on your ankle or your wrist. Basically, you just need access to bone. You can even wear it on your chest, and it vibrates. And through an app, you can control which program you want. My favorite is Recover, but they have energy, focus, sleep, relax. So you can basically choose how you want to feel. And they have studies showing that it powerfully affects heart rate variability and increases sleep quality and parasympathetic activity. So it's a great calming agent. And I definitely live an unnatural life of isolation. Like, for example, today I didn't see one other human soul, which is a beautiful thing, but it's kind of like being on the moon or Mars. It's kind of an unnatural way to live. So I use this just to give my body a sense of safety. And that's one of the hundreds of uses for this. It's great after experiencing extreme trauma, car wrecks, natural disasters like that just happened in Florida. Many different uses for it. It basically just tells your body that it's safe using the sense of touch, which I wasn't consistent with this when I first got it a few years ago, and I've been really consistent with it lately. And it's the consistency that I've been noticing the greatest effect. And lately, I've actually added on top of that the Neurophone NF3, which was created by Patrick Flanagan decades and decades ago. He was a child prodigy, the really interesting background. And I've been talking about that a little bit on my Instagram here and there, but it's an ultrasonic brain device. And I've been using this for at least 8 or 9 years. It's a little rectangular device that's powered by a 9-volt battery with transducers that you put on your forehead. And it's powered by 20 volts is the maximum capacity. You can tune it. I always have it maxed out. And it's a 40 kilohertz carrier signal that transmits pink noise, ultrasound, and harmonics directly into the skull. And you can put it on your neck. You can put it in different areas of the body, but I just like on the forehead. And I wear it all the time when I'm driving very long drives. It's helpful for fatigue. It's helpful for stress reduction. My favorite use is hooking it up to a sensory deprivation float tank, because Flanagan, in his later years, shortly before he passed, there's YouTube videos of him talking a lot about dolphins and the relationship with the saccule, which is a pea-sized organ in the ear that we share with dolphins and some reptiles. And it's an organ of balance, but it's actually, as he described it, an ultrasonic hearing organ. And so that is partly how the neurophone works. is 90% of the sound that this is producing is inaudible, but it's picked up by the saccule. And actually, when you're wearing it and you run your hands over the device, you can kind of hear almost like a radio static occasionally, even sometimes if I'm not running my hands over the device. And what's fascinating is that's only 10% of the sound that the device is producing. The Neurophone NF3 is definitely in my top 5 favorite technologies. I love that it's relatively affordable. I mean, I've had the same device for years and years. As long as you don't drop it on the ground, it's going to last a while. And it's so mobile. I bring it with me every time when I travel, and sometimes I sleep all night with it. And that's another use of the Neurophone is speed learning. And it's my understanding that's actually why Patrick invented it. It was after a comic book where the character could learn at a rapid rate using a device. And so he created that device, and it was called the Neurophone, and you could plug a audio source into it, like an iPod, iPhone. And what I did for a while, for months and months, is play subliminal messages through it. And it takes a different pathway into the brain. Supposedly, it goes straight into long-term memory. So I've had tremendous effects with combining this with, on my website, if you look at Real Subliminal, that's the best website that I found for subliminal message tracks. And what I love about them is they have an app which you can download the tracks to the app offline. And so recently I flew down to San Diego for my mom's birthday. And on the plane, I was running the subliminal messages through the Neurophone into my forehead while my phone was in airplane mode because Wi-Fi wasn't available on the flight. And so that's a great way to multitask. You can fall asleep and you'll still get the benefits. And you could also learn languages faster, and there's just endless applications to that device. So again, that's Neurophone NF3. You can find it on my website, and then I combine it with Real Subliminal. I founded a company called Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. We have a lot of really cool products under the water tab. We have a shower filter. We have the best under-counter 7-stage water filter on the market. That's not just reverse osmosis, but actually has a very specific order of operations of filtration to produce non-aggressive, really pure water. And if you click the wellness tab, you can see all of our supplements. We have Shilajit tablets that I import from Russia. It's the easiest way to take that resin instead of having to chip it out of these jars like most companies sell. You just pop these out of this little tray that the Panacea product comes in. I take 5 every day with my coffee, and I've been posting on my little coffee stories on Instagram facts about Shilajit. Traditionally in Russia, Shilajit has been used for diabetes, angina, jaundice, digestive disorders, nervous diseases, chronic bronchitis, anemia, osteoporosis. In Ayurveda, that system, Shilajit's considered a Maharasa and is recommended for ulcers, bronchial asthma, gastrointestinal infections, liver diseases, geriatric problems, sexual dysfunction, and wound healing. So there's a reason why I called the product Panacea. I'm not making any claims, but Shilajit has fascinating lore to it and just a long history of helping support overall health. We have a bunch of different products: elk velvet antler, jellyfish collagen, beef liver, oyster, and then isolated supplements, zinc carnosine, melatonin, high dose, 50 milligrams. Melatonin, I personally take 200 milligrams every night. So I take 4 capsules of the 50 milligram melatonin formula. We have lithium orotate, which is a really underrated supplement, not just for mood, like it says on the bottle, but actually for protecting the brain. It's neuroprotective, for helping with lipid peroxidation, inflammation, supports bone health. It staves off sarcopenia, so it supports muscle mass and strength. It supports glucose removal, supports the pancreas, supports the vasculature system and oxygen delivery, the cardiovascular system, reproduction. There's so many parts of the body that lithium supports, and part of that could be because of its deep relationship with vitamin B12. Lithium drives vitamin B12 into the cells. And if you click on the living tab, we have grounding sheets, which I highly recommend going raw to earth. I've been doing that since 2010, and it's just an amazing thing that you don't have to think about. You just have to wash it properly, and there's some care that you have to learn about, not using essential oils because that will screw up the conductivity. I use a detergent called Y Shield when I wash my grounding sheet. Then we have coffee, fresh roasted, small batch, and then really clean shampoo and conditioner. So a really cool line of products that support this lifestyle of optimal health, feeling good, having energy, having a positive mood most of the time, and being resilient in today's world where we're just inundated with unrelenting stressors. So, in my opinion, supplementation is necessary, using devices and technology is necessary, and combining the two together, in addition to the basics of eating a balanced nutrition that includes carbs, proteins, and fats, all of the three macronutrients, moving your body enough, grounding, getting light exposure, covering your bases there, then adding on strategic supplementation and targeted devices and technology. I think that is really the combination for optimal health. So if you enjoy the show, share it with your friends and family. I have a new episode released every Friday. Follow me on Instagram, Matt Blackburn. The Mitolife page is on Instagram as well. And I'll see you guys next week. Stay supercharged.